My name is Bob Pine. I'm on the NRWA board and I'm chair of the Climate Impact Committee, which is sponsoring this fascinating discussion this afternoon of this alliteration demystifying depavement. Let's see. So Al Futterman, who is the NRWA's Land Program and Outreach Director, will be introducing the presenters, and he'll be kind of guiding us through the question and answer and the rest of the program. So, Al.
I'm very pleased to have our good folks from Green and Open Somerville with us tonight. Let me tell you what the next 2 months will be bringing. On the 15th of March, Andrew Ahern will speak about degrowth and the Green New Deal. And then in April, Emma Gildes-Game, who is a climate scientist at the Nature Conservancy, will be speaking about various aspects of nature-based solutions, including stormwater and things of that sort. When you have a question, put it in the chat. And also, if people would stay muted during the presentation, and our speakers are willing to take questions while they're in the midst of their presentation, if it's very pertinent and immediate. Otherwise, we'll wait till the end. Cater Price Jones has been depaving since 10-10-10 as part of 350.org's first Global Day of Action. When not gardening, solving crosswords, or planning his next vacation, Cater is estimator for Big Meister, an employee-owned contractor specializing in high-performance remodeling in the greater Boston area. Lee Mounier works to transform how we relate to ourselves, each other, and the urban ecosystem through public and environmental education, music, street art, community organizing, and supporting the local efforts of many amazing individuals and community groups addressing issues of environmental conservation and climate and immigration justice. She has been depaving with DePave since 2015. And Renee Scott is a co-founder of the Somerville's Green and Open Somerville, which works to improve and increase green spaces with a focus on ecological restoration and climate change resiliency. She depaved her own driveway in 2012, got hooked, and joined the organizing team in 2019. So let's now turn it over to Cater.
Okay, first, I'm seeing another screen. I believe Marion Stoddard. You need to click.
Yes.
What do I need to click, Bob?
Pardon?
Near the top in the middle, there should be something that says stop sharing.
Right. Well, I'm seeing you are viewing Marion Stoddard's screen.
Right. No, I mean, Marion probably has to do that.
There you go.
Thank you.
All
right, I'm going to share the screen now.
Okay.
There we go. That looks better. So I'm just going to start us off by introducing the concept of depaving. You know, we all intuitively know what paving is. And so somebody made up the word depaving. I don't think it's in the dictionary, but it's basically just removing pavement, you know, whether it's asphalt or concrete. And so that's sort of what we're here to talk about today. Renee, if you go to the next slide. What I want to emphasize here is that it really is simple. There's, you know, we're going to talk about, you know, what it takes and why we do this and other benefits of it. But what I want to emphasize here is that this is not rocket science. This is just about breaking up ground, picking it up, putting it in a dumpster, and freeing the soil to you know, when it says increase green space, decrease flooding, and you know, there is a bit of fun of, you know, smashing the pavement. All right, next slide. So in Somerville, we've got a lot of backyards which are completely paved over. And it's sort of crazy. And you see a scene like this where the asphalt goes right up to the base of trees. Actually, having trees is sort of a you know, a lucky benefit for this backyard. But we see a lot like this. You go to the next slide, Renee. And this, you know, where people are, you know, using their yards, but there's a lot of asphalt. Next slide. Here's another one that we did recently. There's a garage there on the right, and the house is sort of behind you on the left, and this is their entire yard. Next slide. So when you look at, this is a map of Somerville, and the pink area is impervious surfaces. So, you know, the roads, driveways, you know, roof coverage, everything added up, and then that doesn't allow the water to go through. And the green area is the tree canopy. So the tree canopy is 19% in Somerville. And if you took away all that green, you would see a lot more pink underneath it. And we're about 77% impervious surfaces in Somerville. And when you think about it, that's really, really, really high. And so we tried to think of, what we could do. I get notices from Somerville every time it rains a lot that says there's been a combined sewer overflow into the Mystic River, and and they tell you where it was and how long it lasted and all that kind of thing. And a contributing factor is this impervious surface, or combined impervious surfaces that we have in Somerville. So next slide. So we basically decided to, do something about it. And it's pretty simple. You can see, we break up the asphalt into manageable pieces. We put them in a dumpster. Put them in a wheelbarrow, carry them over to the dumpster and put them in the dumpster. Next slide. There's the dumpster full of chunks of asphalt. And then next slide. And then we celebrate, we achieve, recognize our achievement. And then next slide. And then this is the most important part, I think, is that we then sit down, gather, have some food, talk to each other, and build the community. We always call them depaving parties. We don't call it a depaving, work session. Next slide. So here's sort of a before, during, and then you can see a lot of asphalt here in the end of this driveway. This one was sort of not a back of a backyard, but it was sort of a really wide driveway that was unnecessarily long for the number of cars. We see this a lot for the number of cars and need to park on the driveway. So we took away about half the driveway, and then go to the next slide. Turned it into green space. We didn't do the green, we just did the before the depaving part. The homeowner did the the green and the planting and the little wall. So in a nutshell, that is the whole complicated world of depaving. I think next slide is okay. So we started out. This was the first project we did when the homeowners came to us. This was back in 2010. This was the backyard. And then next slide. We wanted to depave. We didn't at that point. We didn't really know how to do this or what really what the best way to. And so when we did our research, there is an organization in Portland, Oregon called DePave.org. And they have this guide to freeing your soil. It's great. It outlined everything we needed to know, which wasn't that complicated, but they've actually grown into a larger nonprofit organization. They've got a proper budget and everything, and they do large events. They take like a big parking area and turn it into a public green space. We've always just done residential areas of limited scope. So next slide. So we took that backyard and we cut it up into squares in this case, because it was a really solid parking asphalt area, and we weren't going to be able to break it up into small chunks, so we cut it up into smaller chunks, and that was part of the as Al said in the introduction, the DePaving or 350.org had this sort of like get out and work day, and so this is what we chose in Somerville to do, is our sort of get out and work day. The next slide. So then this is the after pictures from that same area. The first year he just threw down some salt marsh hay, I think, and some wildflower sort of seed bombs, and just covered the land to give it something to start bringing back the life in the soil. And then then the next phase was he had a lot of gardens, and I had that sort of upper right picture you see. And then later he cleaned out a bit of that and he wanted to have more open space. So that was more the current 2020 picture. So it's, it's green, pervious, backyard now instead of a whole lot of asphalt. So what, next slide. All right, so this is where we're turning over to Lee.
Awesome. Thank you, Cater. And I guess just before I move into it, I want to recognize, I know there are some questions. Maybe pause for a second in case, Al, you think any of those are important to ask right now, or
We'll take those at the end.
Okay, excellent. Okay, just hi, good to be here with everybody. Like Cater said, my name is Lee. I'm also a member of Green and Open Somerville. Maybe something to just name as well that wasn't in my brief bio, but some of the most recent work I've been involved in is actually with the Charles River Watershed Association. So I'm actually going to name a couple interesting things that they shared with me as well, some from modeling that they did when I talked a little bit more about why we're depaving. So why DePave? I know Cater talked a little bit about things in connection with Somerville and unique characteristics of our community there. I want to kind of maybe sort of pan out a little bit, thinking more about why we DePave on multiple levels, everything from why we DePave on based on our hearts and what we care about, to our community cares and concerns, and then also thinking about the earth. Renee, next slide. So the way I'm going to actually frame this is actually connecting with the word resilience. So resilience on all different levels. The reason I want to talk about resilience a little bit is because it's kind of this buzzword that is just kind of getting thrown around these days. And so it just, for me at least, it feels really important to remind us over and over again what that actually means when we talk about resilience. So when we talk about DePaving as a potential tool for cultivating resilience on different levels, what does that actually mean? Part of the reason I want to name resilience too is because in the demystifying DePaving description for today, it's actually climate resiliency that is named in the description as in connection with DePaving as one of those tools that communities can use to increase climate resiliency. So that being said, resilience is simply the process of adapting well, or again, even thriving. So coming out on the other side of adversity or crises or sources of stress stronger than beforehand. One of the beauties with DePaving is that it's really helping us think about resilience in connection with place, right? People often see place, especially our homes, our yards, as places that are a source of refuge, inspiration, support. All right, even if it's DePaved over, Cater showed you some images of ways people are getting creative on top of pavement. So what could things look like? How can those places be a source of refuge, a source of home for people, but also in connection with helping the earth? We're also thinking about DePaving in connection with resilience because of the things like a changing climate, extreme weather, development, and a lot of these changes are happening at a very quick pace that we can't metabolize, or we feel like we have no control over, or we can't do anything about. So the beauty of DePaving is it's actually helping us in a lot of ways to, I just put the phrase here, meet force with force. So a lot of these forces that in our lives feel like they might be out of our control, right? Might be causes of distress or groundlessness. DePaving is a way to using active force, using our bodies to actually meet the moment, meet some of these more distressing times, in ways that help us, as is noted here, cultivate climate, community, and spiritual resilience. Next slide. So talking about climate resilience, again, Kater mentioned this a little bit. So when we're thinking about DePaving connection with this, we're thinking about DePaving as something that helps us with, again, I'll just read off the slide here. So climate resilience is the ability to respond to and recover from climate impacts. So we think about how DePaving can help with that. And this image here is just helping us to, actually see the difference, right? When we have pervious surfaces, we think about less surface runoff, more subsurface flow, which is just that infiltration of water. And that's what we want to see happen. And right now, especially in Somerville, surfaces are completely covered by buildings, by parking lots, by streets, and water is not getting into the earth, right? So we have stormwater concerns, we have flooding concerns with that, the lack of green space and what that means for heat impacts. Heat is one of the top, if not the top, sort of sources of injury, illness, death, often in connection with climate change. And obviously removing pavement is one way to help cool the planet. And then just a couple other things I just want to name here too. One of the beautiful things with DePaving as a climate resilience tool is that a lot of these conversations that cities are having, they're happening right now in Somerville, are often turning to tech solutions. And a lot of those tech solutions are more sort of disruptive or manipulating of the earth. And DePaving is an awesome nature-based solution. So it has all these other beautiful benefits, including things that are more restorative and are gentler for the earth. So we're just thinking about DePaving as a great opportunity to help in that way. And then, as I mentioned before, with the Charles River Watershed Association, over the last couple of years, CRWA has been doing a lot of flood modeling and running different projections of different nature-based solutions. And one solution that they actually did was to see about reducing impervious cover, and consistently found throughout the watershed that that was one of the top solutions. So, which is amazing. So I will make sure after I finish speaking to, throw some things in the chat, including a link to that flood model and that scenario in case anybody wants to check it out more. You can switch slides, Renee. Thanks. So in terms of community resilience, it's pretty self-explanatory here. How does DePaving help? Kater already talked a lot about it. When we think of community resilience, we're thinking about the actual community weaving, right? Community connection. So the ability of groups to recover from difficulties through connection and working together, supporting each other individually, collectively. We really focus a lot through DePaving on this idea of connection and working together, right? So it's a collective effort. This is not something that any individual is going to do. So it helps increase resilience because just by nature of the activity, you need a group of people to get this job done, right? So, so there's a lot of beauty in that. As Kater mentioned about celebration, the idea behind DePaving is not for this to be burdensome. We are very much in our bodies, and it is an act of labor, but it is an act of labor that is meant to invoke joy. There's a lot of laughter on these days, people sweating and getting in there together. And then obviously with the breaking bread together afterwards and having food, this is all meant to be part of a celebrative energy, right? And then the other piece is really important with community resilience, and especially coming out on the, I know we're still in a lot of ways deep into COVID pandemic, and thinking a lot about the ways that the pandemic, right, really started to limit the ways that we could come together. So, and the ways that we could show care for each other and care for the earth. So that's another thing we're thinking about with DePaving is its ability to be outdoors together. It's a way to connect and show care, during times of pandemic, during times of crisis where we might not be able to come together in other ways. So this is a creative way to be able to bring people together. The other thing I just want to mention on this too is I don't know if people here are familiar with the work of Joanna Macy. She's done a lot of work around something called deep ecology and just thinking about things like active hope. How can we be in hope together in ways that are active? And something that she mentions a lot and where DePaving falls into this work of activism is we can't just be thinking about long-term policy stuff that's really heavy and long-term thinking. So DePaving, as she recommends, is a way to be doing something in the moment, right? Is a way for us to actually actively take action, a way to respond in community. Next slide. So the last piece of why we DePave is really thinking about the internal, right? Thinking about our self-resilience, our spirits, our hearts, right? So when we're thinking about self or spiritual resilience, that really is talking about the ability to maintain a sturdy, positive spirit and a clear sense of purpose, even in the face of suffering. So as mentioned, especially we think about things like the pandemic, article after article is being written. I sit in rooms with young people who talk about paralysis and anxiety and overwhelm and the ways in which thinking about climate change just feels like too much. And what that ends up doing is a lot of people just don't do anything because what can I do? Nothing is enough. And that can have serious impacts on our mental health, serious impacts on our spirit, on our lives. So we really are seeing DePaving as an anxiety antidote, right? So it's an opportunity for us to I guess ourselves feel valued, feel like we have value in these moments. And a large part of that is being in our bodies. So a lot of anxiety is in our heads. And what's amazing with DePaving is it's an opportunity for us to be in our bodies together and to move physically. As you can see from that middle photo there, that's one of our like most rock star DePavers. She's always there with us. I had a conversation with her at a recent DePaving where she was like, dude, DePaving is my therapy. This is like where I come to get it out. You know, I could come and bring my rage, bring my sadness, my sorrow, and in this space, you know, help metabolize, help that stuff move through. So yeah, so just again, cannot emphasize enough this like act of being in the body, this act of being with the earth, in the soil. You know, it's therapeutic, it's healing, and it's a way to be in a lot of ways with each other in the face of suffering, as is noted here. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn it over to Renee now, who's gonna speak with you all about the how. On to you, Renee.
Thanks, Lee.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk more about the actual process of DePaving. And so what we end up doing is the three of us, Caterly and I, end up being sort of the scouting team and the organizers. And we start, first of all, how people find us is most often word of mouth. We do have a mailing list that we'll reach out to let them know about DePavings and events like that. But in general, we'll get random emails and calls from people who say, someone mentioned you DePave and I want to do it. And we often can't even connect how they found us. So it happens pretty organically. So then what happens is the three of us will go do a site visit. We end up DePaving in between spring and fall. Winter just gets, well, not this winter, but in general, winter should be getting too cold to really make it a, enjoyable event, and the asphalt would be pretty brittle or hard to get at. So once the weather starts to warm up, we start doing site visits. We take a look at the actual area, walk through it with the whoever lives there, the homeowner or the tenant, and talk about the whole process. And then we'll set a date with them. Shortly before the actual event, it's on the homeowner. I'll say homeowner, it tends to be homeowners, not renters, but it's on the resident to get the dumpster. That's typically somewhere around $700-ish. And if there are any permits required, and that is totally town dependent. So I would just say if you're planning to do this yourself, look into what your town would require. And then we end up inviting all of the volunteers. And then also prior to the actual event, if it's necessary, and it rarely is, then we would have the resident rent a diamond saw and cut it into the square shapes just to give us a better luck, chance of getting the asphalt up easily. And that looks like this. But again, as I said, this is rarely needed. It's only for really high quality asphalt. Typically, what we love to see is asphalt that's broken up, that has cracks in it. So that often is totally easy to get up without cutting it first. So then it comes to the day of. The dumpsters arrived. It's always great if it can be off the street if possible. In Somerville, that's not always the case, but if it can be on the property off the street, then that's great because you don't need a permit for that. We welcome everybody in. We give a safety talk. We have all of the safety equipment. We have helmets and goggles, gloves, make sure that everyone is feeling okay. And then we'll do a demonstration, just pretty quick demonstration of what we're going to do. We have so many veteran volunteers that we usually have about 20 people who are, happy to show newcomers what to do. We also have people sign in. It's just nice for us if they want to get on our mailing list and that, they weren't before, and just to be aware of where people are coming from or how they heard about us. And we also have people sign waivers. Luckily, and I will knock on wood, we've never had to have a waiver come in handy, but it's definitely something that just has the individual realize that they are responsible for themselves, and they're not going to sue the homeowner or us if something were to happen. We've never had an injury, beyond someone needing a Band-Aid. So we're very, very careful. That's our first and foremost. We're always making sure that people are safe. So then we start on the prying and smashing, and you can see pictures of this. We use pry bars, crowbars, and oh my gosh, and sledgehammers. That's the word I'm looking for, to pry the asphalt up. And I will tell you, every single project is different. You cannot look at a space and say, oh, it's going to be like this other project. Inevitably, there's something different. It'll be, 4 layers of asphalt and you only thought there was 1, or the asphalt's really crumbly. Or one time we were doing this on a warm summer evening and the asphalt was just peeling up in huge pieces, but sometimes it just crumbles into tiny crumbs. So every project is different, but you pry it up. You have a team with 1 or 2 people on a pry bar, one with a sledgehammer, and they'll, you pry it up and they whack it. And then when you can really get that piece free, then there are people loading it into wheelbarrows and they're carting it out to the dumpster. So it's a good team process. You can see in the lower right-hand corner, there are a couple different teams working on this particular project. Again, size dependent. You may only have room for 1 or 2 teams working at a time. Sometimes you can get more like 3 or 4. And then you load the dumpster. You do, a note of warning: if your dumpster is somewhere in a small space, you want to make sure when it's delivered that the door is going to open the way you want it to, that there's going to be access for wheelbarrows, potentially with a ramp. And you want to be careful about throwing it in. You don't want to load above the top of the dumpster. And these are all sort of tricks of the trade that we've learned over the years. And then during the actual depaving, this was one of our larger projects where we had 3 or 4 teams going at a time. You want to just check in with people. It is really fun to just plow through, but you don't want injuries to happen. Everyone wants a turn. Some people love the sledgehammer. Some people only want to stay on the wheelbarrow. It's really nice. It's nice just to check in and make sure that people aren't getting overheated, or they should stop and have a glass of water. So we do that. And then when we're all done, we always celebrate with food. The host will, provide pizza, or we've had tacos made for us on the grill, which was lovely. And it's just a really nice way to look at the work and feel really proud of what you've done. And I will show you my personal story. Was on the left is the before, where you could park 3 cars tandem. And actually, this is a picture of Cater. We did have to use a diamond saw in my particular driveway. And then on the right is my husband mowing our lawn, which I should have a current picture. I've moved from lawn to trying to completely eliminate lawn, and I only have native plants now. And that's another story I'm happy to talk about later. But it doesn't really look like this anymore. It's much, much fuller with lots of plants. So it is totally worth it. We've had, as we were lifting up the asphalt, I just sort of realized, like, on every hot summer day, our yard would just stink of asphalt. And now it doesn't. It smells like nature. And we've had tons of birds come in and insects. And it's just the land is alive again. And it's been such a joy. And I have no regrets. And I'm so happy that we did that. So we do have some questions. I'm going to pass it back up to Cater to start. We definitely want to hear your questions. So we have a couple, sort of primer questions to get the pump going, but the most important thing is that we're answering the questions you all have. So Cater, if you want to take it from here, and then when we run through these questions, I will stop sharing the screen so we can see each other again.
Yeah, thanks, Renee. So I am seeing some questions that come up in the chat. So maybe what I'll do is I'll try to go through those first, and then if people want to add more in the chat, and then we can, if there aren't, I can go through the ones here on the the frequent questions.
Do you want me to stop sharing the screen now then? Would that be better?
Whatever you want to do. I don't know. You could put it on the next one has that, in case other people had the contact information. Wasn't that?
Sorry, here's a nice quote.
Our nice quote. Yep. But then if there's stuff that we don't get to in terms of the questions and all that, or if you've got a question that, maybe is longer and doesn't really pertain to everybody once they hear the reply, you could contact us at that email address later, and we'll try to help you out. But the first one I'm saying is, what tools are used to cut pavement? And you saw the one picture, it's a walk behind diamond bladed saw. So the best is to use one of those because you don't have to carry it. It's got wheels, and you hook the garden hose up to it so it stays wet as it's cutting, and so it doesn't kick up as much dust. There are like a grinder or a diamond blade on just a skill saw that you could use, but it kicks up a lot of nasty dust, and it's not really very pleasant. Either way, they're not really pleasant. They make a lot of noise, and it's a big, heavy machine. So we only use it for there's certain, you saw some pictures like that first one we did where the pavement was only like a few years old, and it's just so solid that you could really work at it with the bars and stuff. And I think that you'd have to spend a lot of time smashing. And so we use the saw for that, and we also use it when we want to get a nice clean line. Like at Renee's, she had that fence on the side to the neighbor, and we wanted to have a clean line there, not just sort of like a ragged line. And so that's when we cut. So let's see, another question was, is the removed asphalt paving going to an asphalt batch plant or to a landfill? And my understanding is that we always specify that this is a fill dumpster, not a like a construction debris or you pay a lot more money for the ones that go to the landfill, basically. But these ones, I believe it's like one of the most recycled materials that gets ground back up and used as road pack, and possibly as more asphalt later. So I believe it is not going to a landfill. Let's see. Another one was, is it common to replace driveway pavement with stones or something else? So you saw there, the 2 strips works great if you can sort of get away with that. And I believe Renee doesn't even park on it much. So then the grass or whatever you've put in between, actually gets some sun. I think if you park there most of the time, the grass might have some, hard times growing. Is that even environmentally beneficial? I don't know if anybody I think it is. I think there's more, more water going into the soil. Yes, if you have a car, maybe, you're gonna leak a little bit of oil or toxins into that soil at times, but I think you're gonna be doing that probably no matter what anyways. So I think that having a, depaved is gonna be better than having pavement, but maybe there's some others, ecologists in the group who may have more information on that. I think we addressed about the diamond saw stuff. Advice you give about green planting. Do you want to say something about that, Renee?
Sure. So one thing we didn't mention that is really important to know, that once the depaving is done, it's 2 or 3 hours of hard work, you're left with a mess. There's compacted, it's not even soil anymore. It's pretty much just dirt. And you've lost the volume. Whatever amount is put into the dumpster is about the amount of volume you've lost of soil. Well, not of soil, but that's now lower than it used to be. So it's really important to actually pre-plan this. You don't want to have exposed soil for very long. It's going to be letting out a lot of carbon. It's going to be dusty. It's going to be messy. You're going to get runoff. It's really still very compacted. So we always recommend knowing the plan you're going to have, the planting plan. And if it's going to happen, if you're depaving in the fall and you're not going to get to planting in the spring, cover it with something, with wood chips, with some sort of hay, something to keep the soil covered. And then as far as the plants, what I ended up doing, and I think probably what a lot of people do, is you bring in fresh fill, fresh soil. Depending if you're going to be growing or not, we highly recommend you test it. In Somerville, it's hard to find soil that doesn't have lead in it. So I was not planting anything edible in this part of my yard. But definitely, I mean, as I mentioned before briefly, I'm a big native plant proponent. I would highly recommend native plants. But as far as planting, Kater's right. I don't drive. I hardly ever park on what was my driveway. Snow emergencies is about it. But I think if you were planning to park on it, you would want to do something that was really shade tolerant, maybe even under, I have 2 stone strips for the tires. So it just protects the soil from, the car from sinking in. I suppose in between that, maybe you could put some gravel or something. And then everywhere else, you could definitely put in plants. Sorry, that was long-winded. Was that answering the question?
Sounds good.
Can I add on that as well? This is Lee again, just thinking about other things that you could do. I just want to harken back to the photos that Kater showed of Steven's yard. And so what he had done, correct me if I'm wrong, Kater, but it sounded like you had said that that in between phase, if you don't also know what you're going to do, another option is to still plant, right? So if you wanted to throw down wildflower seed or something basic, that also does help to bring nutrients back to the soil and prepare the soil for whenever you decide to do something next. So that's also an option, is to actually throw out seed and just native seed ideally, and allow, at least in the meantime, allow that to germinate and to grow while you're making a more definitive decision and plan if you don't have one in place.
All right. The next question I'm seeing is, what sort of volunteers can help? Age, strength, etc. We started out, allowing, it was all ages. And I've got some great pictures of my kids when they were like 7, toting the wheelbarrow, and it was tons of fun. But then we had one depaving where we had a lot of people, and there was a bunch more kids, and they're hard to corral, I'll tell you. If you've got 1 or 2 and you can keep an eye on them, that's one thing. But we then changed our age limit, I think, to I don't know, 16 or whatever, whenever they get to that age that they're really responsible enough to not, go darting in front of someone who's about to swing a sledgehammer. So that became our new minimum age. There's certainly no maximum age. I've been blown away by some, all age groups and stuff. It doesn't, you don't have to work the whole time. You can do as much as you want, but we've never had any issue about, you know, the upper end or strength. You know, if some tasks are too hard, you know, there's other tasks to do, you know, to fit your strength and whatever you want to do. Or just, you know, sometimes people just come and hang out. We get a lot of that too.
I'll jump in with a question and a missed question, if I might. Who provides the tools?
So we just came up with part of that first part, we bought some, Home Depot actually has a thing. If you write to them and they'll give you like $100, you just sort of give them a reason. We get some tools from them, you know, replace our gloves every once in a while. And so they all live in my basement, and we just trot them out. We loan them out to anybody who wants to. So a lot of people end up, you know, doing their own. We meet with them, but then they just sort of do it by themselves. It's not that hard, you know, get a few friends together and just bang it out. So, you know, certainly if anybody wants to borrow tools, they're down, you know, come to Somerville and pick them up and bring them back, and that's fine.
We have a Home Depot in this area. A question that I think was missed was about snow removal in the winter, whether it's easier or harder.
I DePaved my driveway and put in a sort of it's sort of like a grid work of permeable pavers is what they call it, which is really just sort of concrete grid blocks with a lot of stone in between the spaces. And so the water goes in, and I think it's great. It's super easy to shovel. I would never put a plow on it. You know, all of our driveways in Somerville are like the length of one car, you know, like, so it's not, you're doing all this stuff by hand. If you're plowing, I would probably recommend a professional installation of, there are permeable pavers that have a very small space between them. It's like a half-inch, and that does let the water in, and I think they're more engineered to withstand a plow. But I think that I've got less icing up underneath, because when it does melt, you know, sometimes you get in that freeze thaw cycle of like, you get snow, it starts to melt, but then it freezes again. And if it's not able to soak into the ground, into that space, then it can refreeze. And so I never get any ice on my driveway. It's great that way.
And very importantly, do you call DigSafe? What do you do to prevent damage to utilities that may run under the pavement or next to the house?
Yeah, so we don't call DigSafe. DigSafe is more for like if you were planting a tree in that space afterwards, or if you were going more than, you know, we're taking down the top 3 or 4 inches, and any utilities are required to be 18 inches down. So we're not even getting anywhere near that level of needing to call DigSafe. Yeah, and so the utilities are much lower. Sometimes we do come up right up against the house, or or fences. You definitely have to be aware and protective of the the adjoining spaces, that you're not creating damage. But that's slightly different question maybe.
And any issues with water leaching into an owner or a neighbor's basement? Have you ever had to add French drains or a cistern to deal with water?
So no, we generally, our take is that you're better off with a larger holding capacity for when it does rain, and soaking into the soil and having it slowly sort of leach and percolate down into the water table and the ground, than it is with when you have impermeable surfaces like asphalt. It tends to, when it rains, it tends to run off, and if it is pitched towards the house, it'll like all concentrate in much greater quantities against the house, in that little crack that inevitably forms between the house and the driveway. If you're talking about depaving in a place that's right up against a house, and you're worried about infiltration. At my house, I did some extra digging and put in it's sort of like a cistern, but it's like a leaching chamber in the middle of the driveway to give it extra capacity. So when you design a permeable driveway, you really should take down about a foot of soil beneath the top where you're putting in the pavers. And so that becomes a lot of excavation. And what I decided to do was to dig out one area in the middle, put in a leaching chamber, which is basically a plastic, it looks like sort of a domed plastic thing, maybe 4 or 5 feet wide by 10 feet long. And it goes down, and then you backfill and cover that with crushed stone. And that just provides a lot more holding capacity for the water for when it does rain. Maybe that's excessive and not necessary. But I'll tell you, when we get these crazy rains and I go out and check my driveway, there's no surface runoff coming off the driveway at all. And you look at every other, paved driveway, and it's all just running into the across the sidewalk and into the road and down into the storm drains. And that's when we get those combined sewer overflows. So, our theory is the more you can get the water to, enter the ground on location where the rain is falling, the better. And, we're not seeing problems with, because of driveways being depaved, that it's increasing the problem in a basement.
Yeah, that benefit can't be emphasized enough.
I think, just sorry, if I just also expand on what Katie was saying, I think this is also why we really encourage people to be in dialogue with their neighbors about what they're doing in some respect, because so I guess two things. It's, obviously be in conversation, invite them, right? A lot of times we call this a depaving party. So this is an opportunity to even bring your neighbors in to a conversation that they might not know anything about. And we also encourage people, one, to what we talked about before with compacted soil, because a lot of times compacted soil can act a lot like pavement, right? If there's no way for the water to filter. So that's why it's so important to immediately start to remediate, so that it can help not just with whatever plan you want, but also help to actually draw down the water when it lands on the land. And then the other thing I was just going to say was thinking about, we also will encourage people to pay attention during the rains and see where water is flowing so that they do have a sense of that. It helps, I think, then when you're able to have a conversation with your neighbors and let them know, look, we've been watching the way the water flows, and right now it's flowing down the hill into your, driveway, whatever. And if we remove the pavement here, it will actually disrupt that flow. So it's just helping you as well to have a deeper understanding of the ways in which your depaving will have expansive benefits for your neighbors and for the neighborhood. Because obviously you can anticipate that some neighbors might get nervous, and you want to have a response for them potentially, and even invite them into the process.
That touched on what this next question was. After removal of the asphalt, isn't there a compacted base of gravel and stone that must be removed? How is that accomplished?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, a good, at least we'll put it this way, a well, laid driveway or, asphalt should have the organic topsoils removed and then put in a stone base. We've had different sort of approaches to that. I remember at one of them, they sort of raked all the crushed stone together and used that as crushed stone paths in between planting beds. Sometimes as much of the stone and whatever gets put into the dumpster, it's all, in terms of the fill, and, asphalt is pretty much a mixture of crushed stone, and sand and the sort of residue of oil refinery. And so adding extra rocks is not a problem for, the recycling plant in terms of, how they deal with the leftovers. So if you're going to plant, it's really dead soil, and you probably do want to get rid of as much of that rock base as you can.
So we got about 10 minutes left. We still do have several questions, so let's just continue if we might. My understanding is that water from roofs and driveways should be directed away from building foundations. Does depaving help or hurt this?
Yeah.
Oh.
You want to go? Go ahead, right? Renee?
Sure. If you actually, yes, it's a wonderful opportunity to do a rain garden or some,
Yep.
focused direct the water into a planting. After my depaving, my driveway sloped downhill, and there was this area that it was looking like it was going to become a pond. And so I actually intentionally put in a lot of water loving native plants. I've never and I have my main downspout for the whole back of the house running directly into that planting bed, and it's honestly not even wet enough. Like I put in some native cattails, and they died because they didn't have enough water. So it is, yes, it's a great way to direct the water away from your house into intentional planting beds. It's fun.
Has anybody ever encountered invasives moving in after depaving?
I mean, like, probably it's not a I haven't specifically heard that. I think it's like anything else. You really want to, the best way to keep invasives out is to look for them and pull them out, and make sure that the ground is thoroughly planted with native plants that will keep the invasives at bay. So yes, if you just depaved and let it go, quote unquote wild, yes, I'm sure you'd get invasives. Something we look for, there are many projects we could be doing. We definitely are very open with our potential projects that we really want to focus on ones that they intend to increase the green space. Obviously, there's nothing we can do if they say they will and then don't, but we're not doing this to have them cover the whole thing in a patio. I mean, if there's, a small patio included or something, that's great. But our whole point is to increase green space. So we definitely are looking for projects that want to do that.
A lot of what you're describing is more applicable to dense residential areas with small lots. Do you, what do you suggest regarding larger, more widely separated lots?
I think in general, we have just overpaved, certainly in Somerville, but I think probably in more, rural areas as well. I would say minimize the amount of actual car space you need and return the rest of it to nature. I think you're only going to be delighted by what you find. Forget the lawns, put in native plants, and you will suddenly have birds and bees back. Strongly encourage that. I think it's a great project. I don't think, we limit our projects by what will go into one dumpster. My project personally went a little bit over. We weren't expecting it. We had a third layer of asphalt. We only thought there were 2. So we ended up having to hire someone to come haul the rest of it away. But in general, we try to depave the amount that will go into the one dumpster. It's about 2 to 3 hours of work. It's a very manageable project. So it's certainly on a larger scale. If you're going to, if you have a 6-car parking area, obviously that's a larger project. At some point you might decide you want to just hire a crew to come in and, remove it with backhoes or something. But yeah, I would definitely, I don't think it's limited to small areas. You just have to manage your time and schedule it.
I think another thing too, actually to the question itself, I know you're recognizing, right, how much pavement there is in Somerville in connection with private residences. So that's where we began. You might find a place to begin is finding parking lots. You might find that it's connecting with groups and a house of worship, a small business, and there are areas that you find in your community that have a lot of pavement, and you find that people might be open to having that pavement removed. I think the key word here, at least I can think of, is private. So far we've been focused on places where there aren't the additional layers of consideration around liability. So if we were to try to do something on like city or town land, that becomes a different thing. But yeah, so maybe there are other places where people say, well, you know, most of our residences have a lot of green space, but you still find more dense areas or areas that are highly paved. Again, I'm thinking about parking lots with groups that might be willing to have some of that removed and have that transformed into either a garden and that is something actually right now that Green Open is exploring. So in addition to continuing to do the private residences, we are also in dialogue with some local faith groups and whatnot who are considering removing parts of their parking lot to put in gardens. So we're thinking about other ways that we can start to expand the opportunities, you know, for depaving in Somerville. That you might already just jump to that where you live.
Great. I think we had a couple more minutes and 2 or 3 more questions. These next 2, I hopefully will just be yes or no. Does the owner pay anything beyond the dumpster, replacement soil, and new planting costs? Yes or no?
Food for the party after. That's about it.
Excellent. Have you ever had any negative feedback after a project from a customer?
Not to
No.
my knowledge. No.
Either they were too polite to come back to us, or
It's great.
And we usually circle back to people. I mean, that's just, if that's helpful too, like we, as you saw, like the photos from Steven's yard, like, so it's very intentional on our end too, to circle back and ask people how things are going, check in, see if they need anything else. And I guess we're hopeful that if people did have something negative to say, or a frustration or a concern or a recommendation for how we could do better next time, that those can be revealed and shared. When we check in with others, if they don't first find us, we return to them to see how things are.
I should just add, sorry, I read that question about the fees. There could be permitting fees. We should add that in. It really is town dependent.
How many of these have you done?
we averaged like 2 a year.
Okay.
Since like 2010. You know, sometimes, you know, we missed a couple during COVID. We definitely didn't meet, you know, during the worst of that, and we did 3 for a year, I think, recently. So I don't know,
20 something.
20
Yeah.
something.
Sure.
We're definitely fly under the radar a bit. You know, we're not like we're not huge, but we do give these kind of talks, and we try to encourage other people to start up their own sort of depaving wing in your town, you know, and we're willing to help, you know, if you wanted to, if you had some questions about doing that, or, you know, any other follow-up, get in touch with us at that that other email, and or through Al, you know, or you guys, if you lose that email, and our dream would be that it starts a small movement of these different groups, and do it in your own town.